And welcome to another edition of the Sidelines Pass. I am Chris Courtney, sports editor at Sidelines, alongside RJ Gardner, senior writer at Sidelines. Just a two-man show today, but definitely happy to have RJ on, and we're going to be talking a number of different things, starting from NBA playoffs, going into the NFL draft, and also taking a look at kind of the early season trends that we've seen so far in Major League Baseball. RJ, thanks again for joining us. Let's just dive right into it. Playoffs, NBA playoffs started Saturday. We've got a game going on as we speak, Washington and Toronto. Definitely a number of intriguing storylines. Lots of different things kind of going on. A lot of different things that people are kind of have their eye on. First and foremost, obviously, is you look at the West, and they, for the past few years, really. They've kind of been the dominant conference as far as the depth of teams that they've been able to provide as potential championship contenders. Is there a team in the Western Conference right now, outside of Golden State, that you see as kind of the maybe the answer to the Warriors this year in a potential Western Conference Finals matchup? Is it a team like the Spurs who come in red hot? Is it a team like the Rockets, who, despite kind of being banged up all season long, got the number 2 seed and are playing really well, especially James Harden, who's an MVP candidate? I guess when you kind of evaluate the Western Conference at this point, is there a team that you see kind of being able to take down Golden State at this point?
I think if anyone's going to take down Golden State, it is going to be the San Antonio Spurs. I mean, they've got the best coach in basketball. They're built to win in the playoffs. Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, they're all getting long in the tooth. Eventually they're going to hang it up. But, I mean, Tim Duncan's still a very productive big man. Tony Parker's got great court vision. He can score when you need him to. Manu Ginobili can get things going off the bench. And they've got Kawhi Leonard, one of the best two-way guards in the NBA today. And he can man up either Steph Curry and give him a lot of problems, or he can go right head-to-head with Klay Thompson. So, I mean, he is the kryptonite for what the Golden State Warriors want to do, and the Spurs know how to win in the playoffs.
I think it's really interesting when you look at the Spurs. We've kind of talked about this before, but you look at that team and the way that they are built at the moment is, I mean, obviously last year they had many of the same players and they won a championship. But Kawhi Leonard, you mentioned him, and he gives them a different dynamic than they've really had in the past. Someone who is versatile from the wing, who can score from the wing. They've always had pretty solid wing defenders, but not that guy who's necessarily a difference maker from that area on the court. A guy that I look at, though, and give me your thoughts on this. A guy that I look at from Golden State's perspective, who is kind of the answer to Kawhi Leonard, is Draymond Green. And he's had a great season this year, not necessarily getting the headlines that a guy like Steph Curry, Klay Thompson may get, but I think he is just as vital to Golden State's success. And I feel like in a potential series matchup between Golden State and San Antonio, Draymond Green could be that X factor that maybe helps neutralize Kawhi Leonard to a certain degree. I know we're putting the cart way before the horse here, but do you see a situation where maybe that's a guy who makes a difference for Golden State if they were to find themselves in a matchup with the Spurs?
I think that Draymond Green is that X factor for the Warriors, regardless of what the playoff matchup is. His ability to defend and lock down that number one, I mean, that's what you need to have to win an NBA title. You need a guy like Draymond Green out there taking out that other team's number one and letting Steph Curry and Klay Thompson just light up the scoreboard.
Absolutely. Josh, are you able to hear us now?
Yeah, I'm able to hear you and see you guys. So change in technology definitely assisted with that.
That's good.
Yeah,
That's
it's amazing what happens when you go from stationary to mobile.
Well, it's good to see you. We're just discussing the NBA playoffs and looking at the Golden State Warriors and just kind of taking a peek at some of the potential matchups we could see for Golden State in these playoffs. I know it's early. Playoffs just started today. We were just talking about how Washington and Toronto are currently in overtime right now. Lots to discuss when it comes to the playoffs, but we were saying, is there a team out there in the Western Conference in particular that you see really being able to challenge Golden State, who's been dominant all season long? Is it a team like the Spurs? Is it a team like the Rockets, who have been banged up and dealing with a lot of injuries, but are led by a bona fide MVP candidate in James Harden? Do they have trouble even in their first round matchup against New Orleans and Anthony Davis? I guess when you evaluate kind of what the Warriors have in front of them, I guess how would you evaluate that? Do they have any? Is there any potential landmines out there?
About 2 months ago, when I evaluated the Warriors during one of our weekly power rankings, I mentioned that you're going to have to be able to defend the Warriors all the way through 5 positions for 48 minutes. And the question is, what team has the best defense to essentially play not only within those 48 minutes, but sort of mimic their tempo without giving up too much on the boards. And the only 2 teams right now that have been able to do that successfully have been San Antonio and have been, in fact, New Orleans down the stretch. Now, although New Orleans had to kind of dig and they had to ride the back of Anthony Davis, much like they have during the duration of the season, you have a team that's fairly young in New Orleans that could match up with Golden State endurance-wise. So you're definitely looking at the 2 and 3 positions, as long as you're guarding Klay Thompson, as long as you're guarding whoever's going to be at that 3 position, because it could be one of definitely a few people for Golden State. I think that you could take away some of the scoring opportunities there as long as you're New Orleans. And plus, the New Orleans interior defense is technically a lot better than Golden State's. And so if you're not giving up those points in the paint, you're essentially forcing Golden State's hand in that outside shooting. Granted that this is one of the best outside shooting teams in the league with the babyface assassin, you're definitely looking at having to minutes of ball with New Orleans, but Golden State is definitely going to have to bring it as well. They learned from that game that they cannot sleep on New Orleans as a team at all. So I think that they have essentially the best chance of taking away a couple of games and challenging Golden State. Next in line would be San Antonio, but San Antonio is all about execution. They're going to force you to play their ball no matter what style of play they're playing. And with Kawhi Leonard on the perimeter, I think it's going to be very tough for either Klay to so they're definitely going to start having to depend on their second, third, maybe even the 4th guys in rotation for Golden State. So New Orleans definitely will be my first choice to challenge them, and definitely very close second would be San Antonio. Only edge I would give in that matchup, if it comes about that way, is that State is definitely going to try to outrun San Antonio.
Yeah. And that's kind of, it leads me to the kind of the next question that I want to ask you guys and we want to discuss is of all the potential first round matchups in the Western Conference and in the Eastern Conference. Well, I'll start with you, RJ. Which one kind of captures your attention the most, or which one are you most intrigued by? Because there's
first round in the West or the East?
In either conference. When you take a look at kind of what is out there and what the matchups bear, which one is kind of commanding the most attention for you? RJ, I'll start with you, then go ahead, Josh.
I'm really intrigued by the Spurs matchup. I think it's going to be a fun series. Obviously, Chris Paul's never been great in the playoffs, and if he's going to be great in the playoffs, it needs to be this year. The Clippers, their window is closing fast as far as Chris Paul's involvement is concerned. He's only got a few more years left where he's prime to take an NBA title and lead the team to an NBA title. Athletically down low, they can really do a lot of damage with to the Spurs aging post players. So I mean, it's an interesting matchup. They don't really have anybody that's going to stop a Kawhi Leonard, but do the Spurs have enough horses to contend down low? That's my question.
Right. Josh, any thoughts on that, or is there a different series that that kind of has your attention?
I think one of the most intriguing matchups for this first round are going to be the Celtics and Cavs in the East, simply because the Cavs got beat by the Celtics back-to-back games by the Celtics, which is not something that you would expect if you were the average fan of basketball. But in a much more deeper context, I think that Brad Stevens has definitely been finding the glue to bring this team together. When they knew that they had a chance at the playoffs, you saw a completely different team, definitely different sets of lineups. You saw a lot smart stretch. This could be a really interesting, scrappy matchup. I mean, Brad Stevens definitely comes in and he counts deep on a team or two every now and then. Losing against teams that you would kind of scratch your head at and wonder, how does that exactly happen? So definitely excitement and possibility. The Celtics Cavs are going to be one. Number two,
Oops.
how Golden State is going to play against New Orleans, so that's going to be a great matchup there. I mean, you got a preview of Anthony Davis coming in on his second year. I mean, he's playing like a bat out of hell. I kind of would like to see him take a few games, get a lot more than just a game or two in the playoffs. But definitely, I think it's going to be one of the more intriguing matchups. Sleeper, by the way, 3-6 matchup in the East. You're definitely looking at the Bulls matchup. I think that the Bulls might get a little too overconfident on the Bucks, and there might be a game or two where you don't expect the Bucks to win and they come out and pull it out.
Yeah, I was actually gonna mention that series as one that it kind of captures my attention maybe a little bit more than some of the other ones. I think you bring up some good points about Golden State and in New Orleans. It's a really kind of interesting matchup there that you have. You got two young stars in that series, or at least really three, in Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson, and Anthony Davis, guys who you figure are going to be kind of going head to head in the West for a long time. But that Bulls and Bucks series is one that, you get excited about the Bulls, especially during this time of year, especially when they're healthy. It seems like it's been a really long time since they've had kind of their full squad at their disposal. And, I know that they got guys banged up. I know Joakim Noah has been kind of a walking mash unit all year long. We don't need to talk about Derrick Rose and his injury woes. But even Jimmy Butler's been a guy that's, he's had an elbow issue. There's been guys all over the lineup that have been kind of in and out of the training room this season, but they're kind of converging at the right time. I think this is a great opportunity for them to kind of snatch opportunity and really make a run at it. Obviously, though, I think when you match up with the Bucks, I don't think anybody has an answer necessarily matchup-wise for Giannis Antetokounmpo. I think he's a guy that is a player. We're just seeing the beginning of what he is going to be able to do in this league for a very long time. I mean, I don't think he's even 21 years old yet, but he has the skill set of a player and really the length of a player that could be really truly dominant. I mean, there's not really a player outside of maybe a Kevin Durant that has kind of his build and his abilities and skills. So it's going to be interesting. Again, he's almost kind of the the Eastern Conference's version of. I'm not comparing him to Anthony Davis as far as what they both do, but as far as the young star power that conference has, I think he is potentially kind of a player that can be on Davis's level, and I'm interested to see kind of when you dip the Giannis tea bag into the Eastern Conference playoffs, what happens? Is it going to be does he fold? Is it going to be kind of those rookie playoff jitters, or is it going to be a guy who really rises to the occasion and leads Milwaukee in their real first opportunity? I mean, they've been to the playoffs before, but this is their first opportunity with this team and kind of their young collection of stars to really make some good I guess pathways, if you will, for their franchise and kind of the recent go with this team. I think it's key for Jason Kidd to get these guys to play well in this playoff series. I don't think they necessarily have to win, but this is a really good learning. This is going to be a really good learning series for them to go up against a quality team like the Bulls and to see how they fare.
That is true. Now, keep in mind, and this actually plays into, as far as time is concerned, I want to note on something that RJ mentioned. Keep in mind that the Greek Freak has a brother in the D-League team, so they can easily call him up and then replicate the Twin Towers that San Antonio had going on back in '99. So there's no doubt that can also happen. And also keep in mind that when this team was riding that third-place slot early on in the season, that they had a healthy Jabari Parker. Keep that in mind that he's coming back next season, fresh off injury. So this team has a very huge upside coming up in the East. And with everyone talking about the record and everything, I know we bash on the East a lot about how teams are getting in, they're coming in under 500. Yeah, that's nice and everything, but the level of play that the Bucks are starting to bring is actually a lot better in most recent years. I mean, it started 4 or 5 years back when they were coming in the 7th and 8th place and just barely getting to the playoffs along with the Charlotte Bobcats. And you're starting to see this organization really come together, and so they have a really good window for years to come. It kind of reminds me back when Al was playing for the Bucks. That was really exciting. Really exciting time there. Now, talk about that. Really is an interesting point that you said, how the window is closing for CP3, because you definitely see the frustration on his face when they're looking towards perfection. I mean, there have been recent posts and instances where you see players jawing at each other on the team back and forth, and they note that it's their way of wanting to be perfect. And it's one thing to put it on paper, but it's another thing to put it into practice. And yeah, definitely they're doing it when they're up 20, and it's great and everything, but you almost wonder if the team chemistry is starting to fall apart, and if within the veteran leadership there, there's not starting to be some sort of lack of patience with the results. I mean, they went through what they went through last year with the whole Sterling issue, and despite that, decided it came and pulled through in the playoffs and won that first round, but they never really extended any performance past the first round. So you almost kind of wonder if Chris Paul's thinking in the back of his head, maybe I should have kind of fought against that whole trade to the Lakers, and maybe I could have had a better, longer window and essentially led a team that had more upside to it than this team. I mean, they're still trying to get rid of the moniker Lob City. They're still trying to play in the Doppler's defensive schematic. They are getting better at it, but there are just so many individual pieces that haven't really come together when they should have. And I actually agree with you, RJ, that it could be almost time for Chris Paul to move on.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the frustration's been obvious on his face. You see it in the games. You know, when things start to not go their way, the frustration is evident on all of their faces. And that's the one thing about the playoffs. You're not going to get all the calls. Once things start going the wrong way, the Clippers are going to crumble. That's what they do. They're not as built internally strong as the Spurs are, and that's why the Spurs have such an advantage even as a 6th seed. They know they're not going to get the calls. They're just going to continue to play through that. I don't think the Clippers can do that. And, you know, Chris Paul, for as great a point guard as he is, he's failed to galvanize a team in the playoffs, and I think that's going to ultimately tarnish his legacy as a player.
Yeah, he's almost one of those guys that he's such a competitor but it's almost like he is too, like, almost too wrapped up in kind of, just killing the other team, that it almost is like he ignores kind of what is going on around him with his teammates. So there's kind of that aspect that he feels like he's got to do it. It's either him or it's going to be no one else. And so he doesn't almost, like, I'm not trying to get too Zen master here, but it's almost like he doesn't really feel like he can include his teammates, or his teammates don't feel included in kind of what is going on, or the kind of the all-in mentality. They don't really feel all in because it's Chris Paul's show and he's running it, and it's, he'll be damned if he's given the control over to anybody else. I mean, you look at the team and the way that they're constructed. I mean, you got a guy like DeAndre Jordan, a guy like Blake Griffin. There isn't two more athletic center power forward combinations in the entire league. That is a matchup problem for anybody that you run up against. You got a guy like Chris Paul running the show, arguably one of the best point guards in the league. A guy like J.J. Redick, who's really come on these last few months in the season. They certainly have the potential to be a thorn in San Antonio's side, but I completely agree with you, RJ. I mean, who are you gonna take when the cards are down and it's crunch time? You're gonna take San Antonio because the Clippers organization as a whole hasn't proved it, and Chris Paul hasn't proven it. And when you put those two things together, I just don't see playoff success. Go ahead, Josh.
Just for the record, I want to throw this out there. Clippers in 7.
Okay. We'll mark it down.
Mark it down, put it in writing, etch it in stone. I threw it out there, and it only came down to this. The Spurs have been playing this nice juggling game with Father Time, and it kind of has driven us all crazy. Oh, the Spurs are too old. Oh, we're still here. Oh, the Spurs are too old. Oh, we're still here. And I'm like, you know what? I really am falling for the same trick this season, but I'm hoping that this falls through because I almost want there to be an underlying statement of, yes, Father Time gets to us all. But come hell or high water, I think that the Spurs are just not going to go away anytime soon. And I think Tim Duncan's really serious by saying that he was going to stay for another 2 or 3 years and getting a few more championships now.
I believe.
So, we'll see. We'll see. I still say Clippers in 7, though.
Yeah. Well, that'll be a very intriguing series. The whole playoffs, I'm really glad the playoffs are here because you do have, all these different storylines, like I mentioned before, kind of coming together, and we finally kind of get to see, what a team like the Clippers are made of. Are the Spurs kind of on their last legs as a team? Can Golden State make it all the way to the finals and win a championship with their style of play? Can LeBron do something with Cleveland and capture their first championship in forever? So there's a lot of really great things that I think we'll have an opportunity to talk about, and we'll definitely dive into those a little bit more in future episodes. I want to switch gears a little bit now and talk about the NFL draft. It's coming up here in just a couple weeks. Like the NBA playoffs, plenty of things to talk about when it comes to the NFL draft. First and foremost is kind of the battle at the top of the draft between Marcus Mariota and Jameis Winston. There's been a lot of weird rumblings lately. You have Ron Jaworski coming out saying that he's been hearing that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers aren't sold on Jameis Winston, and that Marcus Mariota is a favorite, or many people in the organization favor Mariota over Winston. And then you've got the discussions about the Chargers moving up, possibly offering Phillip Rivers in a trade to move all the way up to number 2 to get a guy like Marcus Mariota. Just to get your guys' general thoughts, RJ, I'll start with you, then Josh, I'd like you to chime in. When it comes to the top of the draft board, is there a clear-cut player that should be selected number one in your opinion, or I guess are you kind of buying into some of the uncertainty at number one, and are you kind of buying into the fact that there's going to be teams maybe clamoring to jump up to two to take Mariota if he doesn't get selected number one?
I think if I'm drafting, the clear-cut number one to me is Leonard Williams, the D tackle out of USC. I mean, he is a surefire. He's going to contribute from day one. Now, I know the Bucs, they're not going to go that direction. So if we're talking based on purely need, Winston's got to be your pick there. Even with some of the speculation and some of the baggage and some of the questionable maturity stuff, he is more polished, pro-ready right now than Mariota is. Mariota needs 1, maybe 2 years behind an older veteran quarterback to kind of learn the game and mature and progress in making NFL reads and throwing from the pocket and taking snaps under center. Winston's there. He's going to make some bad decisions, but he's also going to make some really good ones. And with Vincent Jackson and Mike Evans at wide receiver, I mean, it's a match made in heaven.
Josh, your thoughts?
I agree. For the most part, I mean, when you go with what you need, and I'm just gonna go ahead and piggyback off of everything RJ said, simply because of that specific reason. When it comes to the top 10 draft picks, a lot of people get it in their head that the top draft pick is going to be the best player. No, that's not exactly true. The top pick is the player that's most needed, that's best fit for that team right now, that's most ready to go. And that doesn't necessarily mean that if Jameis doesn't go first, Mariota doesn't go first, if either one don't go top 10, that they're not great players, that they won't be great. It's just that some team had a greater need for some other position than the QB position right then and there. And honestly, when you look at a lot of teams in the top 10, the most needs right now are at the tackles. So if you're definitely going to see a few D tackles, a couple linemen, and some linebackers go in the top 10 over a few receivers who definitely deserve to be in the top 10. So as far as the whole rumor central goes, I mean, yes, that can kind of play something into it. Things as far as whether someone's quarterback ready or not, the whole discussion between who's going to go first overall, Mariota or Jameis, that's a whole different discussion entirely. But for the most part, if neither one were selected number one overall, I wouldn't be surprised. I would just shrug my shoulders and say, okay, congratulations, you got your pick, let's move on.
And I guess if you look at the Buccaneers, let's say that they do take Jameis Winston with the number one pick. I think it's a fine fit. It's certainly a guy that he has all the NFL ability that you would want as far as physically. You worry about what's between the ears, but you could maybe make that argument for just about anybody in the draft. You never know what you're going to get quite in a player. Certainly, there's things that can signal certain things to you, but in the end, when you hand a young 20-year-old kid, multi-million dollar contracts, things are going to happen. So, with that being known, with Winston safely assuming at this point that he's going to be number one, you look at the Titans in number two and kind of what they have, and are they in a position where they need to take a quarterback? Is Mariota a logical pick there? Does he fit their greatest need? Or is there a player like Leonard Williams who is a better fit for what Tennessee is looking to do? I mean, do they have? I guess if you're the Tennessee general manager, do you feel confident enough in your quarterback situation moving forward that you don't need to take Mariota, or is there a need at that position? Do you need to take a quarterback, and do you need to take the best available player, which is arguably Marcus Mariota at number two if you are Tennessee? RJ, then Josh.
I think if I'm the Tennessee Titans GM, I'm going to entertain trade talks at number two. I'm going to try to get some package deals, maybe trade back, get some extra picks in the draft, because the Titans need a lot. If I can't trade back, I don't take a quarterback. I like Zach Mettenberger. You got him in the 6th round last year. Let's see what you can do with him. He's got a lot of talent, and he really fits well into what Ken Wisenhunt wants to do down there. I would take Leonard Williams. No brainer. He's going to be a Pro Bowl defensive tackle. He's a guy you can line up 3 different positions across that line. He can do everything for you. He might not be the most explosive off the first step, but consistently, he's a high motor player. He's going to be great against the run. He's going to pressure on the pass, and he's a guy that can play all 3 downs.
Yeah, I agree for the most part. Actually, again, taking the words right out of my mouth, when you're Tennessee and you're bleeding everywhere, the best thing to do is to take 1 or 2 approaches. Try to batch as many draft picks together as you can to build and shell up those holes, which again may not be what you need later, but you're still going to need those picks. And you got a decent quarterback. You honestly, any great quarterback has also had a pretty decent line. I mean, that's been the story as it's gone, and has had a great defense to essentially get the ball out of the opposing team's hands and get it back into your hands so you can do some work. Zach hasn't had as many opportunities as I felt that he should have in order to be able to perform, and now that he's got this first year out of the way, let's go ahead and do what we really need to do, which is build a defense. And possibly, if I'm really throwing it out there, I might be looking for a running back right now just to try to get some balance to the game. And that's where I'm looking for maybe a steal pick. I mean, we're talking about Todd Gurley as a possibility. I mean, he's got a really nice, solid frame. Not so much a Marshawn Lynch, but a little bit more like a thicker Chris Johnson in his former years when he was at Tennessee. And I really think that if you're looking to steal someone and you're looking to build your offense, that would be the best way to go.
So are you suggesting then that you would consider taking Todd Gurley with the number 2 pick? Is that something that you would give legitimate consideration to, even in spite of the knee injuries?
Despite the knee injuries, I mean, we've seen players come back much better from worse. And I don't want to go down the whole route of last year's pick from Houston. I mean, we don't sit there and we don't want to go down that route. However, I mean, Clowney, I think he might have a good year this year, but when we're talking about running backs, we're talking about a whole different type of mechanics here. And I really think that when you look at the success story of Adrian Peterson, then you have to go with this might be a good pick. And not only that, you could essentially take this pick of Gurley and ship him off to a different team that actually needs a running back for those picks. So you're actually killing 2 birds with 1 stone, filling the needs of, like what RJ said, getting those extra draft picks. You might want to look at it from that perspective as well.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to me to see what Tennessee does at number 2, because they are kind of a forgotten team. Everyone's talking about the Buccaneers and that number 1 pick, but when it comes to number 2, there is a number of possibilities that are kind of at Tennessee's disposal, because, like RJ said, they need help everywhere, but they've got certain guys in certain places where it's just like, okay, you could see them, riding with Mettenberger and having him be that guy, and then maybe in taking a Leonard Williams, or I could easily see them trading back and trying to maybe acquire assets, and they fall back in the draft and maybe they position themselves better to take a running back like Todd Gurley. Looking at the running back position, obviously it sounds like, Josh, you're real high on Todd Gurley right now.
I'm not high on him, but I'm saying that if you were to look at, okay, I say it like this. Okay, so we're talking about like Melvin Gordon versus Todd Gurley. Melvin Gordon, healthier, might not have as great hands, but at the same time, you know that you won't have any problems going in. But let's think about that for a second. One of the things that has come across the big 3 sports, baseball, basketball, and football, is the increase in the number of injuries both in the head and at the legs. And we're talking about injuries to players that have come into the draft. Some of them have been, we've had some knowledge about them, and it's been very little, but there hasn't been extensive knowledge into the injury of the player. Now, think about it from this perspective. We know what's wrong with Gurley. We don't know what could be wrong with Melvin Gordon.
That's an interesting way to look at it. I don't know if you're selling me on it.
I'm saying if I were to sell trying to take Todd over Melvin, do we have an extensive enough report? Is he coming in playing with any type of injury? Do we know that all of his mechanics are going to be there? Do we have the utmost confidence that he's not going to get injured? Are we wasting the second pick on a running back? Which is why, if you're a fantasy, yeah, you take a running back because you know how the running back is going to run. You know their injuries already. You know what they're prone to. So you have that knowledge beforehand. But when you're playing GM for a new running back and you don't have all the necessary information in front of you, you're kind of like, I don't know. You got to go with what information you have, and that's why I say you got to go with Gurley.
RJ, what are your thoughts on Josh's unique draft approach to acquiring rookie running backs?
You know, I don't necessarily disagree with what Josh is saying here. Obviously, you know, head injuries, they're hard to quantify, especially at the college level, because there's not the same focus. You know, Division I is getting there, forcibly getting there in addressing those issues, but you know, in the NFL you have independent parties now addressing concussion syndromes and stuff, and really it's a question GMs need to be asking themselves about every player in the draft, not just running backs. You know, middle linebackers, running backs, you know, offensive linemen, defensive linemen, those guys that are constantly hitting in the trenches, hitting every play. I mean, that has to be a question in the back of your mind, is what is the longevity of these players? You know, how many potential head injuries have they already suffered up to this point that we don't know about? How many concussions did they have in high school that weren't documented? You know, how many concussions did they have, you know, their redshirt year when they were running scout team that weren't documented? You know, all this stuff has a compounding effect. So, you know, it's a great question. But at the end of the day, I mean, you have to look at the tape and you have to, you know, take a look at the records and stuff and make a well-informed decision. And right now, even with the injury, I might lean towards Gurley, but I wouldn't feel bad if I drafted Melvin Gordon at all, because I think he can be a Marshall Faulk type player in the NFL.
Yeah, he's a guy that certainly would need to improve upon his receiving skills, I think, to develop into that. But he's got very similar types of ability. You look at just his lateral quickness and just his ability in the open field. He can play in any scheme. If it's a zone blocking scheme, if it's kind of a downhill blocking scheme, I think he can fit into those different types of roles. I worry a little bit about how he'll get bigger, but I worry about how slender he is a little bit heading into the draft, because he isn't built like a Todd Gurley. He is not that huge, muscular, imposing figure. He is more of a kind of a sprinter out of that running back position. Although certainly, I mean, he's got power, and that's why he's considered a potential first-round pick, is because he's got some of those combination skills. But that's the one concern that I do have about Melvin Gordon, is if I'm giving him the rock, 20, 25 times a game, which doesn't happen that much in the NFL, but there are instances where you need to rely on your running game. Is he going to be able to hold up over the course of a 16-game season and potential playoffs? I don't know that. I know that Gurley is built better for that type of style. Certainly with the injuries, you wonder if he's going to be able to stay healthy. I think there are some legitimate concerns there.
I'll say this: if Gurley couldn't handle the full workload at Georgia, I doubt he's going to be able to handle a full NFL workload.
And that's a fair point, and I think that's a very fair point. I think that when you look at that and you look at kind of how crowded that Georgia backfield was, and playing in the SEC is it's one of the more physical conferences in college football. He's having trouble staying healthy. I think what tells you that he's going to be able to stay healthy and stay on the field in the NFL? The evidence doesn't really stack up there. Now, stranger things have happened, but that might be one instance where I do lean towards Melvin Gordon. That's kind of a check mark in Gordon's favor. Is the fact that, hey, I mean, he was given the ball a lot at Wisconsin. I mean, that guy ran ragged, but he for the most part stayed healthy. I mean, we don't have any documented major injuries, knee injuries, foot injuries, anything like that. He's been able to stay healthy, and so that is something that it's so interesting when you play GM with some of these guys, and it's really not as easy as it looks. We like to sit back, folks like us, and judge these draft picks kind of on what happens after the fact. And we say it should have been so obvious to you, but it's not that simple, obviously. So I think it's going to be there's a lot of intrigue with that running back position. That's one of the things that, because I think either player could be a potential steal late in the first round or even early second round. Depending on how the draft shakes out. I think it's going to be very, very interesting to watch both of those players. Real quickly before we move on to the final topic, is there a guy in this year's draft that you see as kind of your pick for the Rookie of the Year? Is there someone right now that has shown you enough that you think is going to be that type of player? RJ, go first, and then you, Josh.
You know, something just tells me Amari Cooper is going to be your Rookie of the Year. He's not the fastest player out there. You know, he runs NFL level routes. He's not the best route runner though, but he knows how to get open. He knows how to use his body to create separation. He's fast enough to break away. He's got strong hands. You can't teach having a nose for the ball the way that Amari Cooper does, and I think that's going to translate to the NFL, and I think he's going to have a great rookie season, and I think it's going to rival what we saw from Odell Beckham and Kelvin Benjamin and Mike Evans. I mean, and Sammy Watkins. I mean, he is that same caliber talent, you know, maybe even a little more polished than a lot of them coming out of college.
Josh?
I'm right there with you, and I hope that Raider Nation picks him up. Had to throw the plug in there, I'm sorry. But this kid has that. He's 90% of the reason why Alabama was so successful in their deep pass attack. And he did it consistently, game after game after game. You would see stints of where he would get kind of cold, and then just in the second half, just turn it on. And I think that for someone that has that intangible ability to make plays where there aren't any, he's definitely going to be showing off this season.
Yeah, I agree. I think Amari Cooper is going to be a real popular choice, depending on where he goes. If he goes to the Raiders, Josh, I'm sad to say for you that doesn't bode well for his Rookie of the Year chances.
Hey, I wouldn't be so confident there because Derek Carr can play. He showed some flashes last year without any weapons, and that's coming from a Chiefs fan. Now, Derek Carr is a quarterback I wouldn't mind having in my backfield.
I just wanted to record everyone right now. Chris said that Amari Cooper is not going to be Rookie of the Year
if he goes to the Raiders.
If he goes to the Raiders,
I don't deny Derek Carr's ability. It is just something, and much like it is with the Washington Redskins, there's just something in the water in Oakland that turns every potential star player into just hot garbage, and hey, I hope the best for Amari Cooper. I hope the best for the Raiders. I've got nothing on Raider Nation. I'm just saying that I'm very worried about whoever ends up in a Raider uniform this year, just because bad things tend to happen.
Well, you have to. Okay, so speaking about if anyone were to land on the Raiders on the offensive side, Latavius Murray coming off of a great rocky season for the Raiders, definitely showed some flashes of being a great running back. Definitely might be the go-to, especially with DMZ out. You got Derek Carr, who of course has showed some flashes, and you got Mack on the opposite end, who definitely did some damage, and defensive rookie of the year. You got to look at all the stuff that's going to help that offense get better, and they had a lot of things come on when they needed to come on to show some spark and give Raiders fans some hope. So with me looking at all of the tangibles and how the team grew towards the end of the season and how they performed consistently, I gotta say that you're definitely gonna get some greatness out of Amari Cooper if he goes there. And don't forget, Michael Crabtree is going to be there as well. So you got some veteran leadership in the locker room to show Amari Cooper how to be better at the wide receiver position in the NFL. Granted, you say that, okay, Crabtree only had a first great couple of years and it kind of fell off after that as far as his production, but that doesn't necessarily take away from the experience that Crabtree has and had in San Francisco. So it's going to be, I think that'd be a great transition for Amari Cooper there.
And I'll also throw in that Crabtree's drop in production is probably more a component of the scheme he played in, not his skill level.
Yeah, I'm very surprised with how bullish you guys are on the Raiders right now. This is this is shocking to me. That's okay though. We'll see. We'll have our finger on the pulse of this as the season goes on. I'm very interested to see how this shakes out. Before we leave, I definitely want to talk about baseball and kind of the first couple of weeks that we've seen so far of the regular season. Some somewhat surprises. The Giants are playing terrible right now, but you've got a team like the Kansas City Royals who can have continued their success from last season and played really well to this point. Let's at this point in the season, it's of course very very early, but is there anyone or anything that has really kind of captured your attention? Something that has been most notable to you so far in the early going? Go ahead, RJ, go first, and then Josh.
You know, I'd have to say first of all, the Braves' little fire sale, and then they started the season pretty hot. That kind of caught me off guard. But really, it's the play in the AL Central. I mean, the AL Central is going to be a monster this year. They're going to beat each other up. There's some good teams that are playing really good baseball in the AL Central, and the Tigers and the Royals, you know, they're going to be battling it out all season, on into and through the playoffs, I think, this year.
Josh?
Continuing from the AL West, watching the Angels go off and on as well. To be honest, from a fan perspective, watching a few of their games, it definitely is expected to go off and on. Seeing who's going to be rising up in their pitching rotation, but not just the Angels. We're talking about the continued slump of Texas. I thought that Texas wasn't going to be as bad defensively of a team as they have been to start out, but surprisingly, a couple of those games have been a little bit high in what I expected coming out of their infield. Now, then there's Oakland, and Oakland seems to find that diamond in the rough, so to speak, year after year, and the fact that they continue to find ways to just build players, and I don't want to go the whole Moneyball sense because that's been played out, but they continue to find players year in and year out that can continue to contribute to the rotation, just hidden aces, really, and I'm liking it more and more. I wish I were a complete Oakland fan. I wish I were from here so I could have some Oakland pride. But being from where I'm from and being an Angels fan, and when you spoke of the Royals, it just put a dent in my heart because watching those guys go bananas against the Angels and continuing their dominance of teams, just performing like they're still in the postseason right now, playing game after game like it's their last, and just continuing to rack up the score, string along runs. I don't know if it's so much more surprising that they're doing it, but that they've continued.
Right. No, the A's are. in a lot of ways, I mean, they certainly don't have the championship pedigree that the Spurs have. If you're making cross sport references here, but they are kind of, as far as how resilient they are and how consistent they are year after year after year, and they do it with seemingly no name players. That is
I equate the Oakland A's pitching rotation to the New England Patriots receiving core.
Yeah, no, that's probably a pretty fair comparison because they don't really have that stud ace. But that doesn't mean that he doesn't actually exist on that staff. He just probably hasn't quite developed into that player quite yet. So it's something about that organization. They know they really have an eye for not only talent but for what they want to do, and they find the right types of players for their system, kind of what they're trying to do. So yeah, I mean it's no shock to me that the A's are kind of contending, if you want to even use that word right now so early in the season, but they are kind of towards the top of the AL West. I guess a surprising team for me, being a fellow Northwestern, someone who hails from the Pacific Northwest, is the Mariners. You look at how much hype that they had going into the season. A lot of people had them as a trendy, World Series pick. They have started out 3-7, not looking so hot. They still have some things I think they need to work out. Plenty of young talent, and the pitching staff led by Felix Hernandez is certainly a formidable one. But they still, and even heading into the season, you just had the feeling, if you know the Mariners and you know that organization, that team, that the proof really isn't in the pudding until you get a little bit later on into the season. And it's nice to have all these big names and these young stars coming up, but they haven't really proven anything. And they, it's kind of like, it's similar, a little bit similar to everyone's pick of the Washington Nationals. Nationals are, they're playing, around 500 baseball right now. They're, no one's, selling them short at the moment for sure. But they're a team that, again, like the Mariners in a lot of ways, haven't proven a whole lot. They've been to the playoffs. The Mariners haven't. But they still, they've got young talent. A lot of people are again expecting them to make a big run this season. And just you want to be careful, I feel like, with projections like that, because especially with young players and those types of things, that you don't really know what you have until the season gets going. And I think Seattle is figuring that out right now. It's not going to be the cakewalk that maybe they thought. I think that division is going to be a lot more rugged than they expected. Even Houston, you look at a team like the Astros right now, and think about how bad they were a few years ago. The infusion of young players they've got is something that I think is on a similar level to Seattle. It's just, and they don't have the stud ace as a Felix Hernandez in that rotation, but they've got great young players in that lineup that I think they're going to have them kind of hanging around for a few years here. Is there any other teams out there that have surprised you guys in the early going, either with how poorly that they've played or how well that they've played to this point?
Well, I could say there are teams that are not surprising right now. And this is more of a PSA to all the fans out there. Your Giants are going to be okay.
What are you banking? What are you banking that statement on right now?
The alternate years of how the Giants have come off of a championship season and then how they started the season. It's been the same thing. Oh, we just expected to keep on running. We just expected to keep on winning. An expectation early on in the season. If you are any sort of a baseball fan, if you have been watching baseball for the last 10, 20 years, you know that there is a consistency of that you need to let the puzzles fall into place. Give it at least like 20 games to watch a couple of rotations of your players to get some sort of true expectation. Because 10 games in, you have maybe 1.5 rotations in your pitching, You've seen your players come up to bat, maybe a combination of 20 to 30 times out there. You've seen your defense and the types of plays that they can make. And maybe there are a couple players that are really just coming fresh off of injury that aren't as fresh as they should be. You got to let your team put it all together first. Maybe after about 20, 25 games, then you can start hitting the panic button, start pulling your hair out, and start throwing your beer everywhere.
Yeah, baseball's so much of a rhythm game. I think that, sometimes getting off to a cold start, it isn't necessarily a bad thing for some teams because it allows these players to dig in and find their bearings and dial in a little bit better. It helps to kind of focus them. I think sometimes teams that get off to too much of a hot start early on in baseball, because it's such a long game, it's hard to sustain that excellence early on. So I think, starting bad, I mean, obviously you want your team to win, but it's a marathon, not a sprint. And, 3 titles in 5 years, Bruce Bochy's going to get it figured out. They've got a good rotation. They've got good players. The Giants are going to get it figured out. They're going to be there down the stretch. So, I mean, teams that might need to start worrying, though, I don't know, the Nationals maybe, because their rotation hasn't looked as good as you'd expect them to early on. You spend that much money on pitching, you expect them to be good from the get-go, and they're just not getting it. So,
right. One player, if we're just kind of shifting focus from team to player a little bit, one player to me that is just really, it's kind of unreal what is going on right now in New York with Alex Rodriguez. And I know, again, we're only 2 weeks into the season, but Alex Rodriguez leads the Yankees in all major offensive categories: batting average, home runs, RBI, on-base percentage, and hits. He's hit 4 home runs this season, 11 RBI, batting .344. Guys, I mean, is this something that you guys expected from A-Rod this season? Is this something that you think is going to be sustainable for him, or I guess what do you make of Alex Rodriguez, his hot start to begin the Major League Baseball season?
I didn't expect it, but at the same time, I'm not really surprised by it either. Because you have to remember, let's throw out all the steroid stuff and all the PED use, when he had that big contract, he's trying to live up to the hype. Alex Rodriguez came into Major League Baseball as one of the best prospects ever. He is hyper talented. He's got a great swing, a great eye. He's one of the greatest players to ever play the game from a technical standpoint. Yeah, he's doing some amazing things at this advanced stage, but I mean, baseball is a game that you get better at over time in a lot of ways. Yeah, you're going to lose some time on your swing, but you recognize things a lot sooner now. He understands the flow of the game, and maybe being gone all last season, and everything coming to light with the steroids and stuff, maybe it's almost like a weight has been lifted off his shoulders, and he's just playing the game for himself now, and that's a good thing for him.
Yeah, going off of that, as far as expectation, for me, so now he's clean. For me, I had no expectation one way or the other, simply because I just wanted to sit back and watch the show. Let's see how this guy does. There's this theory that steroids are supposed to make you stronger, they're supposed to give you superhuman strength, you're supposed to hit like Superman, and then you can run around bases like the Flash. It doesn't necessarily always work out that way. I mean, steroids are supposed to help you for the most part. Players want to use it for the healing process, so they can get back out of the field and do what they've already been doing without the steroids, just like RJ said. You start out as a baseball player, steroids don't help you. And I'll say this and take it with a grain of salt, but steroids don't necessarily help you be a better player for anything. They'll help you continue to be the same person that you was for a lot longer. The fact that he had a year off of baseball might have helped a little bit. You take a year off of anything, and you know how to do it, you might just come back after the whole natural healing process. You allow your body to get back into a nice natural rhythm. you're doing nothing but sitting back and going and taking batting practice all day, you're definitely going to come out the gate firing a little bit. And this is just not in baseball. This is with a lot of sports. Minus Tiger Woods in golf. I mean, he's a little bit of an asterisk right there. But for the most part, you look at athletes and the way that rest helps you perform. It's definitely in the rotation. It's in your workout cycle. So, in a sense, if you had a slight expectation of Alex Rodriguez to fail, I can understand that because you're kind of knocking the dust off. But you don't know what he was doing during the offseason as far as training or for that whole season that he was away. And my expectation for any athlete is to be working out and having a nice rest rotation in there, and that helps improve the process. So for those that had the expectation of him doing this, bravo to you. You're actually paying attention to how the natural ability of athletics works. And I hope that he continues to maintain this so that way we can put this whole steroid use to bed.
Well, anybody who's listening should take your word for it, because I see you in a doctor's office with hand diagrams and leg diagrams. So this is straight from the source, everyone. So, well, good discussion today, guys. That was a lot of fun. We will be broadcasting again here in about another week. The Sidelines Pass will be back. Might have a different cast of characters, but who knows? We might just surprise everybody and return back with this power trio here. So until next time, for Joshua Thompson, RJ Gardner, I am Chris Courtney. Thanks again for listening to the Sidelines Pass, and we will catch you next week.